Okay, welcome back. So we talked there a little bit about the problem with slots.
Plane haunting.
Plane hauntings as well, and slots, and how that was tying into the kind of stagnating domestic recovery. We had another kind of big storyline almost in aviation over the last few months has been as to whether or not Airservices, which is the organisation that oversees air traffic control, whether or not they have a staff shortage problem. What Airservices say, and I'm being a bit flippant here, is we don't have a staff shortage problem. In fact, what we have is a staff shortage problem. Or to be less flippant, what they're saying is we do not have a kind of underlying lack of staff. In fact, we have 100 staff more than we need to run the network. The reason that we're having issues is because I think they use the words like short-term and unplanned leave of air traffic controllers. So this is like people calling in sick. The counter argument to this is that if you had more staff in the first place, you would be able to cover these things. So all you've done is cannily just change the number of what you say is the minimum you need. Now, what this has led to is periods where the airspace, large swathes of the airspace have been effectively shut down. And so what that means is that rather than the person in air traffic control tower talking to the aircrafts and kind of guiding them in, the aircraft self-separate, which basically means they talk to themselves. Some people say that this is a perfectly safe thing to do. Some people say it's not. But whatever your views, it will lead, obviously, to delays because obviously it's a bit more of a long-winded process. Now, you had Qantas come out at the end of last week, basically, and said one of the reasons why they've had significantly more delays last month was because of what they called staff shortages at Airservices Australia. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this. It feels quite significant that Qantas have actually used this turn of phrase and pointed this out.
Yeah, we had Bitra data from the Department of Transport that showed Qantas planes took off on time just 71% of the time in June. That's down from 75% in May and 77% in April. It has to be said there was poor performance across the board. So Qantas was still the top performing airline when you include QantasLink in there. But a Qantas statement said this performance was below Qantas's own target of above 80%, chiefly due to bad weather at major airports on 19 out of 30 days. We, of course, had those horror wind days at Sydney Airport. But Qantas also said, quote, Airservices Australia's staffing shortages also had a significant impact on on-time performance in June. So Qantas is basically, I mean, everyone in their cat is now saying that Airservices has a staffing problem. We've had Civil Air, we've had the Australian Federation of Air Pilots. We've had all these people coming out, and now Qantas, the flying kangaroo itself, is coming out and saying there are staff shortages at Airservices. It is affecting reliability.
One of the things that's interesting is that, particularly the unions, one of their arguments is, why don't you just say you've got a staff shortage problem? That's their argument, because at the moment they feel that Airservices are being quite coy and quite clever with their language, and they would say, why not do that? Their accusation is that the reason they have a staff shortage problem is that they effectively let too many people go during COVID, particularly with kind of early retirement or redundancy schemes, and they've now been spat out at the other end in a position where they can't cope.
Yeah, that's sort of a common theme that we hear, from. We had the other week a story where we had comments from pilots, we had comments from air traffic controllers. A lot of these air traffic controllers, they've gone to the ATSB because the ATSB sort of have been doing a probe of this, or they've been. The ATSB has now published some RepCon data, and these air traffic controllers are saying this retirement incentive scheme that Airservices has brought in has caused too many air traffic controllers to leave, and now there are not enough air traffic controllers. And of course, ATCs take a long time to train up.
Moving on from that, on a similar note, Jetstar itself has had a lot of problems with reliability. So for many months, they were the worst for delays and for cancellations.
And I hear England has a lot of trouble with rain.
Well, that is just shocking, isn't it? We've moved on from that. You had your time. You had your shine. What you've done there...
It's sort of a redundant statement, isn't it, Adam?
What you've done there is, it's it feels like that's against the rules of the show. But secondly, it's not within the spirit of the show, which is against something that Australians do struggle to understand. We're going to move on quickly from that ambush. Don't you even think about it.
I'm just pointing out, Adam, that it's rather an obvious statement. Jetstar has problems with reliability. England has problems with rain.
I think that's a
New
tenuous,
South Wales has problems with state
link.
of origin.
It's a very tenuous link. Unfortunately, though, the England team will not be hiring 140 new pilots this year, but Jetstar will be. See what I did there? That's a spin bowl to you. Go on. Tell us
I
a bit
don't
more.
think pilots would really be helpful for the English cricket team.
I don't know. They might be good.
They want to be hiring cricketers, surely. I don't know if a pilot... Look, I wouldn't want a pilot trying to play cricket on my national team, and by contrast, I wouldn't want a cricketer trying to fly my plane. Probably less so the latter, actually. Anyway, Jetstar is looking to hire more than 140 new pilots this year. It's a big recruitment drive. It says it's one of its biggest ever pilot intakes. Now, this is going to support its push to improve its reliability, because Jetstar, has said it's working on that. And it also, they're going to support new routes such as Sydney to Rarotonga, Brisbane to Seoul, Melbourne to Fiji. This is part of a broader plan within the Qantas group to bring in 8,500 new operational roles over the next 10 years. And this is, as this ongoing talent shortage continues to hit the industry. So Jetstar's chief pilot and head of flight operations, Captain Jeremy Schmidt, says, it's fantastic to see so many new team members coming on board this year. They've got their ninth A321neo LR about to arrive. They're expecting 9 more before the end of 2024. They need more pilots, says Captain Schmidt, to support the growing fleet and the network. And this, of course, follows a couple of months ago. There was a larger hiring blitz for Jetstar cabin crew. They're looking to employ up to an additional 700 cabin staff by the end of the year.
But the argument with this is, as with the ongoing issue, is the reason they're having to hire so many people now, similar to what we said with Airservices, is that too many people left during the pandemic, and wasn't the entire point of our JobKeeper money to stop this very situation occurring, Chris?
Yeah, look, JobKeeper was intended to keep people in jobs. And for a lot of crew that was stood down, and I know several friends who were stood down from a flying role during COVID, who found a suitable ground job that, whilst wasn't paying the best, allowed them to be at home nightly with their families, enjoy weekends again, and have somewhat of a normal, decent social and family life. COVID leaves, airlines come back, they're questioning, do I go back to flying, or do I stay in a role that I'm now comfortable and happy in, where I have a social life, I can enjoy time with my family and my friends, and I'm not doing weird hours and shift work anymore. And some people chose to not return for that very reason. Some people were lucky enough to get a really good paying job on the ground.
One of the things I found quite interesting is during those dark days of COVID, sort of in the lockdowns, there was a lot of chat of, would people ever want to fly again, or would the numbers be significantly less because of at that point in time when everybody thought Zoom was brilliant, before we all realised it's just rubbish and awful. It's just terrible. Back when everyone was loving it, they thought, you know what, we'll never leave our homes again. We'll just do everything over Zoom. And so the thinking was that we'd get spat out post-pandemic, and we'd be in a world where people just wouldn't want to fly. They wouldn't feel the need to do it. It would purely be something for holidays, etc. Whereas now what we've found is actually the demand is there. People got bored of Zoom. They soon want to go back to socialising and going on holiday, doing business trips. But you still want to kind of shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye before you sign that big contract. So in that sense, those people were proved spectacularly wrong. What has hurt the industry, ironically, is a lot of people leaving the industry thinking that it wouldn't go back to normal.
Well, it'd be hard to have a holiday over Zoom, wouldn't it, Adam?
Well, people, actually what they were doing during COVID, people were watching sort of videos of flights, videos of long train journeys and stuff. So it's not, not the same, is it?
Oh yeah. That is a good point. And if you listen to the podcast we did a month or two ago with Jeb Brooks, he's an aviation YouTuber. He was talking about the difficulties of maintaining a channel during the pandemic. Because he primarily did aviation, but he decided, with the flights not going anymore, he decided to pivot to trains during the pandemic, and that became wildly successful. So he said some of his train videos were even more popular than his flight videos.
Why are you saying that on this podcast? That is not on brand.
Sacrilege.
That is not on brand at all.
But one of the other things he said was that, yes, there are a lot of YouTubers out there, aviation YouTubers, who their whole thing is that they just get on a plane and they just film the flight from beginning to end. You can go and you can look at this entire, 1, 2, 3, however many hour flight, just from beginning to end on YouTube, and you can sit there and watch as the plane does its thing. There's aviation YouTubers out there as well who I know there's at least one that flies on sort of unusual airlines. Like I saw they did a flight on. There was a flight on Air Koryo to North Korea, and flying on sort of old Russian planes. There's another YouTuber I saw who did a flight on an old, like a 40-year-old 767. 40-year-old 767 with Eastern Airlines, which is a U.S. carrier that flies exactly once a month between Miami and Santo Domingo, I think, in the Dominican Republic. So if you like aviation YouTube, there's a whole world of it out there for you. What were we talking about?
I don't know. We're going to go for a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about aviation. We'll be back in a minute.